The film opens with a king and his army discovering a new land to prosper and settle down. They come across a giant cave where lives a female dragon, the last of its kind. The dragon sneakily takes the guards one after another, leaving the king behind. As she appears in front of the king, flaring with rage, the scenes shift to two sisters, Elodie and Floria. In the middle of nowhere, the sisters are cutting wood logs and collecting tree branches. Elodie, the older one, influences Floria to give away most of their stuff, like drapes and furs, to their villagers as they are suffering from hunger and poverty. As they make a long walk back home, they find a lady informant handing out a letter to their father and stepmother. As she leaves, the father tells Elodie that they've gotten a marriage proposal for Elodie from a kingdom called Auria. Her father finds this proposal beneficial for the village, thinking he will get tons of riches in return. Despite not wanting to, when Elodie realizes it's for the betterment of her village, she says yes to the proposal. Up next, the family makes its way to the kingdom on a boat. There, Elodie shares her concerns with Floria about never knowing about Auria until their father sprang it onto her. Their stepmother shows up and gives them a blanket since they're freezing. When they enter the kingdom's region, thick fog engulfs them, making them think there are huge dragons waiting in front of them near the entrance. But as the fog disappears, they realize they're just giant sculptures. The kingdom sends its royal carriage with guards to pick them up from the port and bring them to the kingdom. Everyone's jaws drop upon seeing the giant castle they're about to enter. One of the servants tells the family that everyone in the kingdom is at a family prayer. Hence, he shows them around and takes Elodie to her room, which is luxurious and beyond Elodie's expectations. From fruits to everything else covered in gold foil, Floria also becomes enchanted, but the servant requests that Elodie be left alone. Before the father leaves, Elodie whispers in his ears that she hopes the kingdom is kind to her. Left alone, she walks to the balcony, where she sees another young girl peeking at her from her balcony. Elodie indulges in drawing mazes out of boredom, but as the night falls, she is caught by light coming from outside. As she goes to the balcony, she finds the balcony girl gone and spots a little light far in the mountains. Floria shows up, so she goes to bed with her and spends some sister time talking about her wedding. The next morning, Elodie and her family finally greet the king, queen, and their son. The queen brings attention to the deal Elodie's father has made with them. While the elders talk business, Elodie is sent outside with the king's son to bond before their marriage. Back in the castle, the father comes out after making the deal, but he has a worrisome look on his face. The stepmother asks if he's asked for a fair price, to which he replies that he's getting more gold than ever imagined. While the stepmother continues to interrogate the worrisome look on the father's face, Elodie asks the prince about the light she saw coming from the mountains. The prince says that they were performing an ancient ceremony, which is very crucial for their family. During the wedding preparations, the stepmother nicely approaches the queen to extend their relationship, but the queen rudely declares Elodie's marriage as nothing more than a contract. The stepmother grows suspicious of the queen's intentions, so she approaches Elodie in her room and shares her suspicions. She believes all that glitter isn't gold, and wishes for Elodie to back out of the marriage. Elodie doesn't take the warning, and stays on the decision of marrying the Prince of Auria. The next morning, a group of maids bathe Elodie and put her through tight corsets before putting on a wedding dress. They get her ready and turn her into a beautiful bride. As a family's tradition, they give her a small dagger, which Elodie puts somewhere in her dress. The father walks Elodie down the aisle and watches her get married. In a small gathering, the queen puts a crown over Elodie's head and declares her their new princess. Later, Elodie walks down 100 stairs to bid her family farewell. Now, the prince takes Elodie far into the mountains, claiming the family is waiting for the ancient ceremony to give Elodie a proper welcome. The queen meets the two at the entrance of a cave that they've decorated with candles and flowers. She makes the couple walk over a long bridge that takes them straight into the cave. There, she cuts Elodie and the prince's palms and mixes their blood. After completing the ceremony, the queen insists that the prince carry Elodie on her way back to the carriage. As the prince reaches the middle of the bridge, he apologizes to Elodie and throws her off the bridge, revealing his true side. Elodie gains consciousness a few hours later and finds herself terribly injured and in the dark. In a dried-out forest inside the cave, Elodie cries for help, but only grabs the attention of the antagonist, the dragon. As Elodie makes her way deep inside the dungeon, she spots female necklaces and pendants around. In the Black Forest, hundreds of birds on fire rain down on Elodie. The dragon makes her first appearance and asks for Elodie's name. Elodie refuses to speak and hides behind tree trunks, while the dragon yaps about Elodie's kind, owing to her for generations. She then spits fire from her mouth, wanting Elodie to run for some pleasure. Elodie runs and hides in a small tunnel, but one of her legs is caught on fire and burned badly. She wraps her burnt leg with a fabric torn from her dress and lights up her pendant with the dragon's spat-out fire. In immense pain, she crawls her way further into the tunnel and comes across a wall full of slimy larvae that glows. The only problem is that there is a giant gap between her and the larva wall. She jumps to the other side, but falls into the ditch. She manages to stick to the wall by using the dagger that was given to her by the maids. By jabbing the dagger into the wall, she works her way up and finally reaches the larva. She rips off one of her sleeves and puts some lava inside in order to use them as her only source of light. Walking ahead, she stops under the melting icicles and drinks the melting drops to quench her thirst. The dragon spots Elodie there and spits fire over the icicles. Horrified, Elodie runs further into the small crevices of the cave and finds a dozen girls' names carved on the walls with stone, confirming that the family has thrown other girls here before. Elodie falls asleep in those crevices and dreams of all the victims who have made it here. When she wakes up, she finds the larvae suckling on her wounds. When she plucks them out, she is surprised to see all of her wounds healed. She then looks further into the carvings and realizes the victims before her have mapped a way out on the walls. She follows the directions and comes to the end point, where she sees a hole on top of a giant crystal wall. As light beams from the hole, she realizes she's finally made it. She makes multiple attempts to climb the wall, but slips many times. In the end, she successfully climbs it, only to find herself in a very high area from where she can fall and die. She sees a couple of army guards walking in the cave's direction, so she yells for help, but she can't be heard from that far up. Her screams summon the dragon, who taunts her for making a failed attempt at escaping. As she is about to spit fire and roast Elodie alive, she hears some men calling for Elodie. She returns to her dungeon to see who's arrived for Elodie's help. To no surprise, it is Elodie's father to the rescue. Looking around, the helpers declare Elodie dead and suggest leaving, but the father orders them to stick around until Elodie is retrieved. Meanwhile, Elodie wanders and comes across the main dungeon, where she witnesses 3 rotten fetuses of the dragon. Here she realizes that the king took the lives of the dragon's children. We see a flashback of the dragon taking the king under her claw and promising to bring him greater pain than death. In the present, the dragon attacks Elodie's father and his men. Elodie painfully watches the dragon poke her claws into her father's chest and screams mistakenly. Simultaneously, one of the father's men also makes a sound, prompting the dragon to chase him instead. Elodie quickly approaches his father, who apologizes to her and begs her to escape. As her father dies there, Elodie climbs the ropes and comes out of the cave, but the dragon spots her and comes after her, spitting fire everywhere. Elodie takes one of her father's horses and flees. The wreaked havoc is witnessed by the king and queen from their castle. While Elodie hides under rocks to save herself from the dragon's wrath, the queen kidnaps Floria and makes her guards stab the stepmother for what Elodie has done. The next day, the stabbed mother manages to make her way to the cave to save Floria. Luckily, she finds Elodie and she tells her everything. Elodie sends her back, promising that she will bring Floria back. Meanwhile, the prince refuses to do the horrible act with Floria since she's too young. The queen cuts her own palm instead and mixes her blood with Floria's before throwing her down in the dungeon. Since Elodie has been through all this before, she uses ropes to come down with a better plan. She cuts her hair short, goes to the larva wall to collect a few for light, and creates a distraction to get to Floria. When the dragon flies away toward the distraction, Elodie unites with Floria and tells her to hide until she settles business with the dragon. She tries to tell how the Orions have been fooling her by giving her 3 innocent girls each year to pay off the debt of ending her bloodline. But the dragon doesn't believe Elodie and attacks her. Elodie also pokes her eye out with her father's sword and overpowers the injured dragon. The dragon asks to be put to death for taking the lives of the innocent girls, but Elodie uses the larva to heal the dragon instead. In the end, Elodie makes allies with the dragon and sets the Aurea kingdom on fire, which was on its way to marry another innocent girl, whom Elodie asks to run away. Elodie becomes the new queen of the kingdom. She sends her sister and stepmother back with most of the kingdom's riches to end poverty in her village, and stays back to deal with the kingdom's affairs. Thank you for being a part of Instant Movie Recaps. If these tales of mystery and intrigue sent shivers down your spine, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to Instant Movie Recap for more bone-chilling narratives. Stay tuned, and until next time, stay captivated.